"Please, dance with me before he sees," she whispered, her voice trembling, unaware that the man standing before her wasn't just a stranger, but her new millionaire. A whisper is one of the quietest sounds a human can make, yet it has the ability to carry the loudest emotions. It carries fear, urgency, trust, desperation, and sometimes even hope. In the story behind the words, "Please, dance with me before he sees," the whisper is not merely a request. It is a confession wrapped in silence. It reveals more than the woman intended to speak aloud, because a whisper often comes from a place too fragile for full-volume honesty. A whisper exposes the truth that a person may be too afraid to say publicly. When her voice trembled into those words, she wasn't whispering to hide the message. She was whispering because that was all her courage could sustain. When people whisper, it usually means their spirit is tired, their heart is overwhelmed, or their safety is at risk. And yet, even in its softness, a whisper can ignite action. It did in this story, and it does in life all the time. The power of a whisper lies in what it forces us to do. Listen closely. Loud voices demand attention, but whispers invite it. They call us inward, asking us to lean closer. Not just physically, but emotionally. You cannot listen to a whisper without choosing to be present. That is what makes it profound. In that ballroom, where music played and conversations filled the air, her whisper cut through the noise for one reason. It carried truth, a truth she could not hide from, even if she tried. When someone whispers to you, their voice isn't the only thing speaking. Their body, their eyes, their breath, all of it communicates a silent request for understanding. That moment, that whisper, told the millionaire everything he needed to know. She was afraid. She needed help. She needed someone to stand between her and whatever danger stood nearby. That tiny voice became a doorway into her hidden reality. Whispers often reveal what screams cannot. People scream when they want the world to hear them. People whisper when they hope only one person will. A whisper creates an immediate, intimate connection. It builds a bridge between souls, revealing, "I trust you enough to tell you quietly." Whether the trust is intentional or instinctive doesn't matter. What matters is the vulnerability it contains. In many situations, especially dangerous or emotional ones, people whisper because they do not want to draw attention. Fear teaches silence. Trauma teaches quietness. Survival sometimes depends on how unnoticed you can remain. That is why her whisper carried weight. It wasn't just the sound of fear. It was the strategy of a woman trying to stay safe. She whispered because she didn't want him to notice. Because she didn't want to confront the danger directly. Because sometimes a soft cry for help is the safest one. The power of a whisper also lies in its ability to change someone else's behavior instantly. When the millionaire heard her words, he didn't ask questions. He didn't hesitate. He didn't look around for explanations. He moved. He acted. The whisper activated the protector inside him. It taught him that true power does not lie in money or influence. Sometimes it lies in the ability to recognize a silent plea and respond with compassion. In life, many of us miss whispers, not just literal ones, but emotional ones. People whisper through their actions, a forced smile, an avoided conversation, a lowered gaze, a sudden stiffness when certain people walk in. These whispers are everywhere, but only those who listen deeply ever catch them. Listening to whispers requires sensitivity, empathy, and awareness, qualities that often define the strongest individuals. The woman's whisper teaches us something universal. Not every cry for help is loud. Some are soft, trembling, almost invisible, and yet, these quiet signals often need the most urgent response. A whisper doesn't need volume to be powerful. Its strength lies in the message hidden beneath its softness. Throughout history and in human relationships, whispers have shaped decisions, shifted destinies, created alliances, and exposed danger. Empires were built and destroyed by whispered secrets. Friendships were formed through whispered confessions. Love stories began with whispered promises, and lives were saved by whispered warnings. In this story, the whisper becomes the turning point. A moment where fear meets hope, where danger meets protection, where strangers meet destiny. It becomes the moment where everything that follows changes direction. The millionaire did not need her to shout. He understood the language of quiet desperation. That is what makes the whisper powerful. It is a truth spoken softly, yet received deeply. Listening to whispers is a form of emotional intelligence. It requires us to pay attention, not just to words, but to the spaces between them. Not just to the voice, but to the trembling behind it. Not just to the tone, but to the story the speaker cannot bring themselves to say out loud. The woman's whisper teaches us that sometimes the greatest strength is not in the loudness of the voice, but in the bravery of speaking at all. Her whisper was a moment of trust, vulnerability, and courage. It was her quiet way of saying, "I need help, and I hope you're the kind of person who understands me without explanation." And he did, and that moment changed everything. Presence is more than simply being in the same room as someone. It is more than standing nearby or occupying physical space. Presence is awareness. Presence is attention. Presence is choosing to see what others overlook. And in the moment when she whispered, "Please, dance with me before he sees," the power of presence changed everything. Many people move through life distracted, preoccupied, lost in their own silence, their own problems, their own thoughts. They walk past people who are hurting. They stand beside those who are afraid. They listen to words but miss the meaning behind them. The world today is filled with noise, messages, notifications, responsibilities, and most of us are present only in body, not in heart or mind. But that millionaire in that moment was truly present. Not because he knew her, not because he recognized her fear, not because he expected anything from the moment. He was present simply because it was his nature to pay attention, and that made all the difference. Presence requires slowing down. It requires noticing tone, expression, posture, and energy. It requires the ability to step out of your own internal chaos and tune into someone else's world for a moment. That is what the millionaire did when her trembling whisper reached him. He didn't brush it off as accidental. He didn't assume she was joking or exaggerated. He didn't treat her fear as an inconvenience. His presence allowed him to interpret her whisper correctly, as a call for help. Presence is the foundation of empathy. You cannot help someone if you do not first see them. Many people witness situations but do not intervene because they are not emotionally present enough to understand what is happening. Presence allows you to notice discomfort others try to hide, to sense danger that hasn't fully unfolded, to hear the unspoken. And often, the unspoken carries more truth than anything loud or obvious. In the ballroom that night, dozens of people likely saw the woman. They may have noticed her beauty, her dress, her movements, but few would have noticed the panic in her eyes or the tension in her breath. They may have heard her voice, but not listened to the fear woven into every syllable. Why? Because they were present physically, but not mentally or emotionally. Presence demands something deeper, the ability to pause your world long enough to feel someone else's. That is what the millionaire did instinctively. He didn't need to know her backstory. He didn't need proof. He didn't even need a second request. Her whisper was enough because he was present enough to hear it fully. This level of presence is rare and powerful. It's what leaders possess, what protectors embody, what compassionate people practice. Being present allows you to notice when a friend is quieter than usual, when a loved one's smile doesn't reach their eyes, when a child hesitates before speaking, when a stranger's whisper carries an unspoken plea. Presence turns observation into understanding. In that fleeting moment, the millionaire's presence became her protection. His focus shifted immediately to her safety. He read the situation faster than words could explain it. He didn't question, "Why are you afraid?" He didn't ask, "Who is he?" or "What happened?" He simply stepped forward, physically and emotionally, positioning himself between her and danger. That is the gift of presence. You act before hesitation has a chance to win. People often underestimate how much their presence matters. You don't need wealth, status, or influence to be a source of safety for someone. You simply need to be aware. The millionaire's money had nothing to do with his immediate response. His awareness did. His ability to be fully present in that moment allowed him to see her fear and respond to it with steadiness and compassion. Presence also creates connection. In that short moment, without exchanging names or history, a bond formed between them. Not romantic, not transactional, but human. A bond built on the simple truth, I see you, I hear you, you are not alone right now. That is what presence tells someone. It says, I am here with you, not just near you. I am listening, not just hearing. I am paying attention, not just glancing. In a world where people often feel invisible, overlooked, or dismissed, presence is one of the greatest gifts anyone can give. It transforms situations, it prevents harm, it builds trust. Presence is also a form of intuition. When you are fully aware, you do not need long explanations to understand emotion. You feel it, you sense it, you respond to it naturally. The millionaire didn't need a story. He understood her fear through her body language, her tone, her urgency. His presence allowed him to detect what many others would have missed. In real life, presence protects in many ways. A teacher noticing a quiet student withdrawing. A friend recognizing a subtle change in someone's voice. A partner sensing when something is wrong without being told. A bystander stepping in because they feel something is off. Presence can prevent wounds, emotional or physical. It can interrupt danger before it unfolds. It can help someone breathe again when fear steals their air. In this story, presence was the difference between her facing fear alone and having someone step into her world with strength. It was the difference between being ignored and being saved. It was the difference between panic and possibility. Presence turns a whisper into action. It transforms silent fear into shared responsibility. It turns a stranger into a protector. It turns a moment into a turning point. Vulnerability is often mistaken for weakness. Yet it is one of the most powerful expressions of courage a human being can show. When she whispered, "Please, dance with me before he sees," she revealed a truth many people spend their entire lives trying to hide. That sometimes, even the strongest hearts tremble, and it takes extraordinary bravery to admit it. In that moment, her vulnerability was not a flaw. It was a lifeline. It was the quiet bravery of someone who had run out of options, but not out of hope. She wasn't simply asking for a dance. She was revealing that she was in danger, that she couldn't face it alone, that she needed someone to stand with her. Asking for help, especially from a stranger, takes guts. It takes humility. It takes a belief, however small, that someone in the world might care enough to respond. We live in a society that often rewards toughness and punishes softness. People are taught to hide fear, to smile through pain, to pretend everything is fine even when their world is crumbling behind their eyes. But true courage is not pretending to be unbreakable. True courage is saying, "I'm breaking. Please help me before it's too late." Her whisper carried that kind of bravery. Vulnerability is powerful because it demands honesty, not just with others, but with yourself. She had to acknowledge her fear internally before she could voice it externally. She had to confront the truth that she could not face the threat alone. That moment of self-recognition is its own act of courage. Many people endure fear silently because admitting it feels like surrender. But she understood that vulnerability is not surrender, it is strategy. Her courage lay in choosing connection over isolation. Fear isolates, courage reaches out. When she reached for the millionaire's hand, she wasn't reaching for money or status. She didn't even know who he was. She was reaching for safety, for a human presence, for protection. She risked rejection, misunderstanding, judgment, but she reached anyway. That is vulnerability in action, stepping into uncertainty with nothing but your truth. Courage in vulnerability also means trusting the unknown. She did not know whether he would help her, whether he would turn her away, or whether he would question her. She didn't know if he would make things worse or expose her fear more publicly. But she took the risk because her instinct told her that remaining silent was more dangerous than being truthful. Vulnerability requires that kind of risk-taking, allowing someone access to your fear without any guarantee of how they will respond. It is easy to be brave when the situation is safe. True courage appears when everything inside you wants to hide. Her whisper was not only a sign of fear, it was a declaration of strength. It said, "I am scared, but I am still fighting. I am small right now, but I am not giving up. I need help, and I am brave enough to ask." So many people equate vulnerability with loss of control, yet in this story, vulnerability gave her control back. It allowed her to redirect the situation. It allowed her to choose an ally. It allowed her to send a signal that only someone with awareness and compassion would understand. Her vulnerability became her power. The millionaire recognized that. His response wasn't shaped by pity, but by respect. He saw that stepping forward in vulnerability requires more strength than most people realize. He understood that fear doesn't make someone weak. It makes their bravery more visible. Her whispered plea wasn't a collapse, it was a display of inner resilience, and he responded with equal courage, accepting the responsibility her vulnerability placed in his hands. Vulnerability also reveals authenticity. In that moment, she was not hiding behind politeness, pride, or composure. She didn't craft a perfect explanation or try to justify her feelings. She simply spoke the truth, raw, unfiltered, immediate. Authentic vulnerability strips away all pretenses and shows a person exactly as they are, without shields or masks. And in that authenticity, connection becomes possible. This connection is what allows people to protect, support, and understand each other. Vulnerability builds trust, not because it asks someone to save you, but because it shows them who you really are. In this story, her moment of vulnerability became the foundation for everything that unfolded afterward. Her whisper invited honesty, trust, and partnership into a moment of fear. Vulnerability is also contagious. When one person is brave enough to be open, it often inspires others to respond with compassion. The millionaire felt her fear and stepped into a role of support, not out of obligation, but because vulnerability unlocks the human instinct to care. When someone is clearly hurting yet still brave enough to ask for help, it stirs something powerful in those who witness it. The courage in her vulnerability ultimately reveals a universal truth. Everyone, at some point, needs someone, and admitting that does not diminish you. It strengthens you. Her whispered plea teaches us that vulnerability is a form of intelligence. It knows when to speak, when to reach out, and when to trust. It is wisdom shaped by experience and sharpened by fear. Her voice was soft, but her bravery was immense. She did not hide her trembling. She used it to find safety. She did not silence her fear. She turned it into a request for protection. Vulnerability doesn't make you helpless. It makes you human. And being human in the right moment is the bravest thing you can be. A dance is rarely just movement. It is emotion. It is rhythm. It is language without words. But in this story, the dance becomes something much deeper. A metaphor for transition, for escape, for courage, and for the delicate shift between danger and safety. When she whispered, "Please, dance with me before he sees," she wasn't inviting a stranger to share a romantic moment. She was asking for refuge. She was asking to step into a different reality, even if only for a moment. The dance became a shelter. In a crowded ballroom filled with music, laughter, and conversation, a dance appeared ordinary to everyone else. But for her, it was a shield. It was movement that protected her from being seen. It was a way to blend into the rhythm of the room instead of standing alone in fear. Each step she took with the millionaire was a step away from the danger watching her from the shadows. This is where the metaphor becomes powerful. Sometimes, to survive, you must move. Not run, not scream, not fight. Just move into a safer space. Move towards someone who makes you feel protected. Move away from the hands that threaten your peace. The dance symbolizes that movement. The moment they stepped onto the floor, she shifted from being prey to being partnered. She chose to enter a space where eyes were watching couples, not isolating individuals. She chose rhythm over rigidity, motion over fear, connection over vulnerability. Dancing allowed her to disappear in plain sight, but the dance also represents trust. When she placed her hand in his, she wasn't simply following tradition. She was trusting him with her safety, her body, and her secret. Dancing with someone requires coordination. It requires letting them guide for a moment, letting them take the lead, letting them steer the space around you. She trusted him with that power, even though she barely knew him. And that trust, born out of desperation, grew into a silent bond on that dance floor. The millionaire understood the unspoken message embedded in her movements. He felt the stiffness in her fingers, the urgency in her steps, the slight tremble in her breath. Every sway, every turn, every shift in her posture communicated something she didn't have time or freedom to say aloud. The dance became a conversation about fear, a conversation about protection, a conversation about the unseen danger approaching from behind, a conversation about her past and his purpose, spoken entirely through motion. Their steps together represented the rhythm of two strangers suddenly navigating the same crisis. His movements became controlled, protective, deliberate. He positioned himself so her back was shielded, so his body blocked her from the line of sight she feared. He moved with her not for the sake of elegance, but for the sake of safety. The dance in this moment could be seen as a metaphor for life itself. Life is a series of steps, some graceful, some clumsy, some uncertain. Sometimes you lead, sometimes you follow. Sometimes you stumble, sometimes you soar. Sometimes the music is soft and comforting, and sometimes it is loud and overwhelming. But the beauty of dance is that you keep moving. You stay in motion, even when fear tries to freeze you in place. Her dance with him was a reminder that even in fear, movement is strength. The dance also symbolizes transformation. When she stepped onto the floor, she was afraid, tense, uncertain. But with each passing moment, her heartbeat aligned with the music instead of the fear. Her body, once rigid, began to relax in his hold. Her eyes, once darting in every direction, finally locked onto his. This wasn't romance, it was grounding. It was the moment she reclaimed her breath. A dance can change how you feel about yourself. It can shift your posture, lift your chin, straighten your spine. Dancing can remind someone that they are still alive, still capable of movement, still able to choose something other than fear. In this story, the dance gave her a temporary world where danger couldn't touch her, where she didn't have to hide, where she could breathe again. To him, the dance became a promise that he would protect her until she was safe. A promise that he had stepped into her story willingly. A promise that he understood she needed more than steps. She needed strength. And so, he danced not for pleasure, but for purpose. The metaphor extends even further. Dancing requires balance. Balance between two bodies, balance between fear and courage, balance between past trauma and present hope, balance between running and standing still. On that dance floor, she found balance again, not because her world suddenly became safe, but because someone stood beside her. Someone held her steady. Someone made the chaos feel manageable, even if only for the duration of a song. The dance becomes the turning point, the metaphorical shift from victim to survivor. It symbolizes the moment she stopped facing fear alone. It symbolizes the instant he understood the role he needed to play. It symbolizes the quiet transformation from helplessness to connection, from trembling to trusting, from hiding to standing. And in that moment, moving in rhythm, surrounded by music and strangers, the metaphor becomes clear. The dance is not about escape. It is about choosing to move forward even when fear tries to hold you still. Power is one of the most misunderstood forces in human life. Many people chase it, few respect it, and even fewer know how to use it with wisdom. But in this story, the moment she whispered, "Please, dance with me," before he sees, the millionaire's true strength revealed itself, not in his wealth, not in his reputation, but in his decision to use his power to protect someone who needed him. Power is not about dominance. It is about responsibility. And the way someone reacts when faced with another person's fear is the purest test of their character. When she reached for him, she didn't know who he was. She didn't know he was wealthy. She didn't know he had influence, resources, or authority. She only saw a man and hoped he was one who would help. What she didn't realize was that he carried a kind of power that extended far beyond money. He had the power of presence, the power of awareness, the power of empathy. He had the power to act decisively without needing permission or applause. Using power for good means stepping into a situation not because it benefits you, but because someone needs you. That is what the millionaire did in that split second. He didn't see her fear as an inconvenience. He didn't treat her whisper as drama. He didn't ask, "Why should I get involved?" He simply responded. That response reveals the deepest truth about power. Real power acts quietly. It moves silently. It protects without expecting recognition. Anyone can throw their weight around, raise their voice, show authority, demand attention. But the millionaire understood that true strength lies in the gentleness of your actions, not the volume of your command. His greatest power wasn't the money in his bank account, but the integrity in his character. The dance became his way of stepping between her and danger. But his decision to help her was not a dance. It was a declaration. It said, "I will not let you face this alone. You are safe here with me. I am using everything I have not to impress you, but to protect you." Using power for good means understanding that when someone is trembling, when someone is whispering for help, when someone's eyes reflect danger, your power becomes their shield. It becomes a bridge from fear to safety. It becomes a quiet, steady reassurance that the world still has people who care. Many people misunderstand power because they equate it with control. They believe power means telling others what to do, being obeyed, or being feared. But the purest form of power is the ability to uplift, to shield, to serve. The millionaire's actions show that power used correctly creates safety, not fear. It creates comfort, not intimidation. It creates trust, not tension. In that moment, his power became purposeful. He didn't use it to overpower someone. He used it to empower her. He didn't use it to show superiority. He used it to offer protection. He didn't use it to gain anything. He used it to give calm, confidence, and courage. Power used for good operates in silence. While others might have ignored her distress, too wrapped up in their own world or too afraid to get involved, he stepped forward because he understood that those who carry power should act when those without it cannot. That is what makes power meaningful, the willingness to share it. Because the truth is, fear makes people small. Danger makes people shrink. Trauma takes away someone's sense of control. But when a powerful person steps in, not to dominate but to defend, they restore what fear stole. They give back safety. They give back stability. They give back the belief that humanity still exists. The millionaire didn't flaunt his identity. He didn't mention his status. He didn't use his name as a weapon. His power wasn't in his title. It was in his ability to stay calm in her chaos. He held her with steadiness, with purpose, with the kind of assurance that comes from a man who has learned how to carry responsibility well. This moment also reflects a deeper truth about moral leadership. The world doesn't need more powerful people. It needs more good ones. People who understand that when someone is silently suffering, power becomes a tool of healing. People who understand that when someone whispers for help, power becomes a voice of protection. Using power for good is not heroic. It is human. It is the natural response of someone who values life, dignity, and compassion. The millionaire didn't rescue her to become a hero. He stepped in because he saw her humanity. He stepped in because he had the ability to help and therefore the responsibility to act. That is what makes power beautiful. Not the wealth, not the influence, not the authority, but the intention behind it. In that ballroom, surrounded by people who may have noticed her fear but lacked the courage or awareness to intervene, he became a quiet guardian. He showed that real power doesn't need to be loud. It doesn't need applause. It doesn't need recognition. Real power is gentle, steady, and selfless. And in that moment, he used his power not to change the world, but to change her world. Life is not only shaped by long journeys, big decisions, or carefully planned choices. Sometimes it is transformed by a single instant, a moment so small it could be missed, yet powerful enough to alter everything that comes after it. In this story, the instant she whispered, "Please, dance with me before he sees," became that life-shifting moment, a moment where two paths collided, two stories intertwined, and two destinies changed direction forever. Moments like these happen without warning. They do not announce themselves. They do not arrive with clarity or explanation. They appear suddenly, wrapped in fear, urgency, or opportunity. And yet, those moments often become the turning points we remember years later. The before and after of our lives. For her, that whisper was a moment of desperation. She didn't plan it. She didn't rehearse it. She didn't even know if it would work. She simply acted on instinct. The instinct to survive, to protect herself, to reach for someone who might help. And that single decision, made in a heartbeat, changed the course of her night, her safety, and even her future. For him, that moment was equally transformative. He entered the ballroom as just another guest, another man blending into the crowd. But her whisper brought him into a story he didn't expect. In an instant, he became a shield, a protector, a force standing between her and the danger she tried to escape. And though he didn't know it at the time, that choice to respond instead of ignore, to act instead of hesitate, would shift the direction of his own life as well. One moment can awaken purpose. Some people spend years searching for meaning, unsure what their role in life truly is. But sometimes meaning arrives unexpectedly, in the form of someone who needs you. The millionaire didn't know that the purpose he had been quietly carrying within him would be activated in that moment. She didn't know that her whisper would awaken something more powerful than fear, his responsibility, his empathy, his courage. One moment can reveal character. People often talk about what they would do in a moment of crisis, but true character is shown only through action. He could have stepped back. He could have ignored her. He could have dismissed her fear as paranoia or drama. Instead, he stepped into the moment fully. His reaction revealed not only who he was, but who he had always been. A man of integrity, a man of compassion, a man who listens to the quietest cries. One moment can break cycles. Her whisper didn't just ask for a dance. It interrupted a pattern. Maybe she had been running from this danger for a long time. Maybe she had tried to hide or handle it alone. Maybe she had endured fear silently too many times. But this time, she chose differently. She chose to ask for help. She chose to trust a stranger. She chose movement instead of paralysis. And that choice broke a cycle of fear she had been trapped in. That is the beauty of a single moment. It can end something painful and begin something new. One moment can build connection. People talk every day, pass each other, make eye contact, interact casually. But true connection, that is rare, and it often begins unexpectedly. When she grabbed his hand, she created a bridge between two worlds that otherwise would never have met. Their lives, which had been separate until that instant, suddenly collided with force. And in that collision, understanding formed, trust formed, a quiet partnership formed. Moments like these remind us that the people who matter most in our lives often arrive unplanned. They walk in unexpectedly, stand beside us in our weakest moment, and leave footprints on our path we didn't know we needed. One moment can restore hope. Fear steals hope faster than anything else. It traps the mind, freezes the body, and makes the world feel smaller and darker. But when he took her hand, when he stepped into that dance with purpose and steadiness, he gave her something she had lost: hope. Hope that someone cared. Hope that she wasn't alone. Hope that there were still people who would stand by her when danger closed in. Hope often arrives through people, and often through strangers. One moment can change how you see yourself. When she stepped into that dance, she may have believed she was helpless, but the moment she asked for help, she proved she was not weak. She was courageous. She took action, she made a choice. She reached out when her fear wanted her to remain frozen. And that single moment reshaped how she saw her own strength. One moment can change everything. It can be a whisper, a decision, a risk, a step, a glance, a hand reaching out. Moments like these remind us that life doesn't always transform through grand gestures. Sometimes it transforms quietly, instantly, elegantly. The moment she whispered will live forever in both their memories. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was defining. It was the moment she trusted, the moment he stepped forward, the moment fear met protection, vulnerability met strength, and two strangers began rewriting each other's stories without even realizing it. One moment can indeed change a life. Sometimes it changes two. And in that moment, when everything felt dark and uncertain, one small act of courage changed an entire life. The girl who once stood silent, invisible to the world, finally found hope, because someone cared enough to listen. Her story reminds us that no matter how loud the world gets, kindness will always rise above the noise. So if this touched your heart, remember, sometimes you can be the reason someone chooses hope over fear. Stay kind, stay aware, and never ignore the signs, because heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they simply pay attention.